versus Malfurion.
And our next budget deck is all about Uther. We're going to be playing a mid-range Murloc Paladin, and this one does seem a little bit more expensive than you'd expect from a budget deck, but this is the closest balance to viability and budget that I could really come to. Now, it is actually a little bit cheaper than it appears if you've been playing for a while, because there's quite a few cards in this deck that you'll probably already own. So, Outdoor Peacekeeper, and Stampeding Kodo, and even Stonehill Defender by now, and Equality. That does take off a lot of dust from the cost. Things like Murloc Warleader are going to add a little bit of cost to this deck, and there are actually a lot of Murlocs from the latest set, Journey to Un'Goro, that we use here. So it's all about getting on the board early, and basically steamrolling your opponent, but there's also a couple of tricksy cards in there to help you get back in the game. So when you just feel like you're running out of steam, you have things like Stonehill Defender and Primal Fin Lookout that help you discover cards, that help you pull in things from outside your deck that your opponent isn't expecting, and that makes it a little bit easier to go up against decks where you might run out of cards, but you've still got a little bit of hope. And I quite like decks that still have a little bit of hope, because even when things look bleak, you still have a chance. Like, someone innovating out a Fletchling is actually quite scary, especially when you haven't played anything yet in the game. And especially when they play Hungry Crab into your Murlocs. And I don't even run an expensive deck. Like, this isn't too bad. This doesn't even have Sunkeeper Tarim. It doesn't have the Vilefin Inquisitor, you know, the 1 mana, 1/3. So we're cutting down on costs with the Paladin, which is typically quite an expensive deck. You usually see things like Tyrion, which by all means throw it in here if you have it. But this is a budget version, of course, with room to grow. So this is a decent place to start if you're looking to play Paladin in the current meta. I think Murlocs provide the most consistent opening for a mid-range Paladin deck, and if you're going for more of a late game Paladin, then you need to run a lot of other more expensive cards like Tyrion in order to give you the legs in the late game. Now, the reason I chose the Murloc engine is because, one, it forms the basis of what is one of the most popular decks and most successful decks in the current meta, and also Murlocs are quite cheap. So they give you that unfair aspect of the deck that you look for every time you build a new deck. You want something to be unfair in it to even give you a reason for building it in the first place. So in this case, it's how big Murlocs can get if you have loads of them out on the board at once. And then you use that as a basis to add in other cards and generally use the mid-range strategy to win. Now, this Druid is a token Druid, which typically is really difficult to deal with. Now, luckily I did have those buffs, so I could get on the board early as well. Even though he played Hungry Crab, and he played a Fletchling, which actually did quite a lot of work, I just about held on in this scenario. Now, this Hydra would have definitely killed me if I didn't have Equality, and big minions like these is why we run Equality, because this deck is always, if you're playing it right, if you're not too unlucky, is always going to have a minion on board. So it's going to make it a little bit easier to deal with the Hydra. Now, unfortunately, we are up against a Druid, so this Noble Sacrifice isn't going to be quite as useful as it otherwise could have been. Just imagine if he didn't have that hero power, we'd be able to Noble Sacrifice, go with our weapon into the 1/1, and then the 8/1 would just die to the Noble Sacrifice. Unless he's running some secret removal, but I doubt there's room for that in the Token Druid. So the Token Druid is actually quite interesting, and I might take a look at that very soon, but I wanted to make sure that I did a budget deck with every single class, as difficult as that may be, for every single meta. Paladin is the 7th, and we've got 2 more remaining after this. I need to find how to do one for Mage and Rogue. Now, I'm not too worried about Mage. I've got an idea. I've got a brewing something, a little concoction. But Jesus Christ, Rogue is difficult, so no guarantees there. So as you can see, coming back to this game, we're slowly coming back into the game, and I really need to pull one of those Discover a thing now. I need the Primal Fin Lookout, or I need the Stonehill Defender to stay in the game, or maybe even Curator. I need something. I need the deck to give me something so that I can actually proceed and hopefully win. Now, luckily I do still have that weapon, so I can get rid of the Gull like a Crawler, which isn't doing anything against me because I don't run Pirates in my Murloc Paladin mid-range deck. So we're back on the board. Luckily our opponent doesn't have too many cards either, and also you'll notice with this deck there's not much in the way of draw. So by using Discover cards, we're kind of making up for that, making sure we refill our hand every so often. Now, things like Divine Favour might actually be a good shout in this, because that's really good against control decks. And here's the Primal Fin lookout, and you'll notice we never even drew into the Curator. Now I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the only card from One Night in Karazhan that I've actually got in the deck. And to be honest, I haven't even found it that essential, so don't feel like you have to buy that adventure. It just gives you some legs in the late game against control decks to try and even out that matchup. But you'll find with Murlocs, you're going to win against mid-range decks and sometimes even against aggro decks, because you can go a bit longer with them, with things like Spike Ridge Steed and also your Discover cards. It kind of just gives you that little bit of an edge over these kind of style decks, and it means if you stay alive, you can kind of turn the situation into something like this and hopefully win the game. So with that, I think our opponent concedes. There we go. And I think that about wraps up what this deck is all about. You get on the board early, and even if they have a counter to you, hopefully you get lucky with the Discover mechanic and you can actually come back into the game. Now I think this is quite a fun deck, quite a nice little budget take on the Paladin at the moment, and of course there's room to grow with it as well. Be sure to hit subscribe to see more, and also hit the little bell if you want to get notifications every time I upload a new video. And I'll see you next time.